Hi there. The movie Men of Honor is the true story of a guy called Carl Brashear, a young man who joined the Navy, United States Navy in 1948, rose to become a Master Chief Petty Officer. That's the highest enlisted rank in the American Navy. He was also the first African American to achieve the rank of Master Diver. So the film's really about his struggle to achieve those two things in an officially segregated and, as we can see in the film, extremely prejudiced United States Navy. But it's also a film about three other things. It's about two men who develop a deep trust and respect for one another but can never express it. It's about the price men pay for their pride and ego, and it's also about the toxic fallout of that same pride and ego that sort of descends upon the people around them, the people closest to them. Early on in the film we see young Carl Brashear working with his father, who was a sharecropper. Carl's dad is portrayed as a tough man, physically tough man with a very distinct moral code. Even when they're desperate to get the fields ploughed, Carl still has to go to school. He's not excused that by his dad so that he can help him on the farm. His father always clearly wants something better for him, and Carl clearly looks up to him enormously. There's a very poignant moment where Carl leaves to join the Navy and his folks come to see him off at the bus, and his father's clearly broken up. He's really going to miss Carl. He's obviously very proud at the same time. And he tells Carl, get in there and fight, and don't come back anytime soon. He says it's going to get tough, and you've got to, basically he says you've got to go in there with both fists swinging. It's a poignant scene for any, men who've ever, said goodbye to their sons or parted with people they're close to but not wanted to appear overly emotional or sad. Then this scene's very well acted, and I think there's a lot in there for all of us. A huge amount is conveyed through non-verbal means. The final gesture is Carl's dad places a hand on his shoulder and hands him the family radio to take with him, and the two of them are clearly holding back tears, but it's the man code. They don't shed a tear, and Carl goes off to join the Navy, taking with him his father's last words, which pretty much were get in there and fight, and that's exactly what he does. By today's standards, that might be considered a very toxic message, the idea that men need to solve their problems with their fists or by an aggressive stance. But I think we can see as the film develops really what else was there for him to do. This was what he took in with him, and I think it served him very well. So, when we rush to judge the message that we give our sons, our young men, we might want to stop and consider that there are times when they are going to have to do that. And whilst it's never, ideally your first option, I would say it still needs to be on the list. A little bit later on in the film, we see Carl perform some amazing feat of swimming off the deck of the ship that he's working on, and whilst he gets officially busted for it because it wasn't his day to be swimming, the captain decides to promote him to rescue swimmer, and it's around about this time that he decides that he wants to be a master diver. He makes his application. Long story short, he's told by everybody that it's not going to happen, but his application's accepted, and he reports for duty at the dive school, where he meets Master Chief Billy Sunday. Now, in the real story, there was no Billy Sunday. There were two instructors apparently at the school, one who was actually very reasonable and one who was very much not reasonable. Let's just say that. Both of these guys are played in one character by Robert De Niro as Master Chief Billy Sunday, and the two men come immediately into conflict. Sunday doesn't want Brashear there, neither does anybody else. He's certainly made to feel very unwelcome early on. And as his time at dive school progresses, we see every effort being made to break Carl, to make him quit, to throw obstacles in his path. But he keeps on fighting, and it's actually, you know, on that level, this is a fantastic film. It's great fun to watch, and Carl's struggle goes on and on. I mean, and we come to see Sunday recognise in Carl not just a man of great grit and determination, but actually someone who's clearly got what it takes to be a diver. We can see a little bit of sort of grudging respect creeping in there as Carl consistently overcomes all the obstacles placed in his path. Now, I find it really interesting that in this film, these two men are able to express their deep resentment and loathing for one another in the most eloquent terms. There's really no difficulty for them in doing this whatsoever. It's fluent, it's, you know, the exchanges are actually, they're very powerful and they're very plausible. But and we'll come back to this in a moment or two as the film develops, where we see the trust and respect that then becomes then starts to exist between these two men. They're unable to express it in any verbal sense whatsoever, which again I think is interesting. You know, as guys, you know, we often find that anger, rage are emotions that we can allow ourselves to express, but any form of supportiveness or tenderness is something that, you know, even today, you know, as a traditional guy, that's not something we can always allow ourselves to express. Another true part of the film, and let's be honest here, this is Hollywood, they took some absolutely amazing liberties with the story. A true part of it is obviously Carl, who'd left school early, has a fairly rudimentary education. Learning to be a diver involves a working knowledge of various elements of physics and chemistry. This is something that, even with all Carl's guts and determination, he simply doesn't have. So he takes up a lot of his spare time, a lot of his leave time, weekends or whatever, in the local library, where he enlists the help of a young lady called Jo. She's a medical student and she's the assistant librarian. And she agrees to help him with his physics, Boyle's law, etc., etc. But she makes it very clear early on, her father was in the Navy. She says, the first time you go out drinking and fighting, the deal's over. I am not going to help you if this is what you're here for. And he makes her a solemn promise on the spot. He says, I promise you that's not going to happen, not at all. So the two of them obviously become romantically involved, and the film progresses. In practically the very next scene, we see Sunday's wife, played by a young Charlize Theron, approach Carl outside a bar and basically challenge him to confront Billy Sunday. She knows that he's been on the receiving end of Sunday's displeasure, prejudice, rage and general unpleasantness, and she says, go on, he's in there, go ahead, you know, take a swing at him. And Carl does exactly that. He confronts Sunday. This is a great scene in the bar. Sunday says, you think you're a better man than me, Carl? You're goddamn right I do. So there and then they do this crazy breath-holding challenge using two traditional brass deep-sea diving helmets that are filled with water to see who can hold their breath the longest. Yeah, surprise, surprise, spoiler, whatever. Carl wins, and at that moment, Jo, his girlfriend, comes into the bar, and it's obvious that he's broken this really, really important promise to her straight away. And all it took was one person questioning his toughness, and that legitimised him breaking a promise to someone who'd gone out of her way to help him, and someone who clearly cares about him deeply. We could say, yeah, you know, you know, when we look at sort of, you know, the modern version of masculinity, that Carl totally crossed the line. He completely blew it. You know, he let his ego get right in front of him, and his, you know, willingness to confront this guy. But again, let's ask ourselves, guys that are watching this, when that challenge is thrown down, are you man enough? Are you tough enough? It doesn't legitimize it, but it can make any act of, needless foolishness at any level of risk taken at absolutely no personal, monetary or physical reward gain. That all becomes totally okay. And Carl really doesn't have an explanation or an excuse to make to Jo. Well, not one that she's going to buy. His integrity as a man was challenged. His toughness was challenged. He had no choice but to take on Sunday. And let's not forget, he had been on the receiving end of this miserable bugger's, unpleasantness and spite for quite some time. So instantly, challenge accepted, and that legitimizes him breaking his promise to Jo, who's clearly very, very upset and disappointed at that. Spoiler alert, not that you'll be too surprised to hear it, Carl passes his final assessment to become qualified as a diver. The head of the diving school, this crazy old guy called Mr. Pappy, orders Sunday to make certain that Carl doesn't pass. And in the final extremis, Sunday disobeys that order and gives Carl the time he needs to finish the final assessment. And we see him come out of the water after a very, very long time. His final assessment's been sabotaged, but he still completes it. Sunday clearly at this moment is proud of Carl. Nobody could fail to be moved by this guy's grit and determination. He earns Sunday's respect. Sunday gets demoted. Carl moves on to take up his first posting as a diver. Sometime after that, he's involved in a salvage operation. In the film, it's portrayed as recovering nuclear missiles that were lost in a B-52 crash off the coast of Spain. That's actually real, but Carl Brashear wasn't involved in that, but he was injured in a salvage operation, and the lower part of his right leg was really badly damaged. He ends up in hospital, and he's told that's the end of his diving career. Jo comes to see him with the kids, and she says, "Oh, it'll be okay. There's still stuff you can do." And he says, no. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to be reassessed, and I'm going to go back to my duties as a diver. Let's not forget what Carl went through to get that in the first place. It's cost him a tremendous amount. It's nearly cost him his life. It's probably going to cost him his leg. And he is not pulling over for anything. He's come too far to turn round now. Him and Jo differ over this in the hospital, and he says, "I'm doing this for my son," and she totally calls him on it. She totally calls bullshit on that and says, "No, you're doing this for you. It's always been about you. Don't be, mistaken in this. You're doing it for yourself, and if that's what you want, me and the kids are leaving." She's right. He is doing it for himself, but I put it to you, we can sympathise with him. Look what he's had to put up with to get there. It's been miserable, and just with, finally, this glittering prize that he's always wanted just in his hand, it looks like it's going to be snatched from him, and he can't have that. He just can't take it. Is it the right thing to do? She says, "Right, that's it, I'm leaving," and he's got no answer. Very, very tough moment for him. I'm not going to sort of say whether or not that was the right thing to do, but I put it to you that he's placed in an impossible dilemma after all that he's been through at that moment. In the true story and in this one, Carl Brashear says, "Right, amputate the lower half of my leg. I'll get a prosthetic, and then I will pass my reassessment to go back to active diving duties with my prosthetic leg." If anyone else had said it, it would have sounded nuts. And the truth of it was, he'd already shown himself to be a man of tremendous, courage and determination. So, that bit's actually true. He did. They let him go with that. They said, "Okay, if you can pass the test," which involves part of it is walking 12 paces in a full deep sea diving rig, which at the time was a brass helmet, lead weights, lead boots, tremendous amount of gear to carry, you know, for someone with 2 good legs. Anyway, before the assessment comes up, Sunday re-enters the story and offers to coach Carl back to full fitness to make the assessment. He's actually deep down, he's very proud of Carl, perhaps one of the best divers that he's trained, and he recognises the, you know, sacrifices that he's made and the struggle, but he doesn't say so. There are no words of sort of sympathy or encouragement exchange when Sunday, you know, enters the physio ward or whatever in the hospital to find Carl on the floor after he's fallen over. He goes, "Oh wow, Cookie, it must have been one hell of a party." He calls him Cookie. This was his service nickname in the early part of his career because he was a cook. And Sunday takes him right back to all the things that make him most angry by needling him with this this nickname that he had. In that we can see some of the ways that men do actually support one another. A lot's been said about the sort of poverty and poor quality of sort of emotional dialogue that men share with one another, but again, you know, I'm putting it to you that a tremendous amount of respect, friendship and support can be expressed in ways that to some people and by modern standards might look like the diametric opposite of that. Openly taking a whiz out of them, making a joke out of their difficulties. These can be unpleasant things, but under certain circumstances, between guys that trust each other, this can be a demonstration of great trust, friendship, and respect. And this is the way Sunday supports him. And Carl never says thank you or appreciates it, but again, by the same token, we can see that he is massively grateful to Sunday's help. No one else was there to assist him in this, you know, enormous struggle he was going to have to make. He was ready to do it on his own, but this guy turns up, he shows up. And I would put it to you that that is one of the most important things that anyone can do for anybody else. You don't have to bring the answers, you don't have to make it all okay, you don't have to shed a tear or sort of, you know, comment on the sort of, you know, tragedy of their situation. If you turn up for that other person, you've done 95% of it. That's what Sunday does, and his involvement is absolutely crucial. In the final scene, we see Carl make his assessment, the 12 steps. Sunday's not permitted in the assessment courtroom because of his sort of disciplinary record. Nobody wants him in there. And at the last minute, he discovers he can't accompany Carl on this final stage of his journey back to full duties. And sorry, I'm not going to insert the clips here. You'll have to watch the movie. It's absolutely brilliant. As the two men part, as Carl Brashear walks into the court to start his assessment, they exchange a nod, and a tremendous amount is passed in that moment. And again, you know, I would say to people that say there's, you know, a real sort of poverty of dialogue between men and they can't express their feelings in a really adequate sense, a huge amount can be passed that way with a nod, with a shoulder clap, with a hand on the arm, or just a couple of words, often as not making a joke out of the situation. It can be tremendously supportive and powerful. We see that moment. Yeah, obviously Carl does this a brilliant scene. You know, he has to make 12 steps with his prosthetic leg, wearing this enormously heavy deep sea diving outfit. He does it, and he's restored to full duties. That much was true. Carl Brashear served for quite a number of more years in the Navy as a diver, and then as a dive instructor, retiring finally, I think in 1980, as a Master Chief Petty Officer. They've actually named a ship after him as well. He's passed away now, but he's left quite a legacy and he blazed quite a trail. But I would say that this excellent movie is about one or two other things as well. So have a watch of it, enjoy. I always welcome comments. Some of you might disagree with some of the things I've said here about sort of traditional versus modern masculinity and the value that that can still have. So I welcome that, your comments below. and hopefully we'll be speaking again soon. Okay, take it easy.